It finally happened, the show that all real fans of professional wrestling were waiting for. All In 2023 at Wembley Stadium was truly a spectacle to behold. And that's the key word, spectacle. Spectacle is something that AEW have kept to a minimum, preferring to focus on the actual wrestling inside of the ring. But for a show this big, the biggest wrestling event ever, they had to go all in. It was truly surreal to see a WrestleMania-sized event, not from WWE, happening. What many people don't realize is just how truly important this show was in cementing AEW in the upper echelon of wrestling promotions. A lot of the hype leading up to this show was ticket sales alone. Many felt that the build for the pay-per-view wasn't up to par for such an event, and those people are entitled to feel that way. I disagree with those who feel that way though. But even if I agreed, I always knew that once the actual show happened, AEW would knock it out of the park. Every big name on the AEW roster that was available made it onto the show, and what resulted was one of the best wrestling shows I've ever seen. From the 0 hour where we saw MJF and Adam Cole win the ROH Tag Team titles against Aussie Open, and Hook reclaiming the FTW title, it was evident early on that the record 81,305 wrestling fans in attendance would elevate this show to unforeseen levels for AEW. CM Punk and Samoa Joe kicked off the show with a fantastic bout for the real world title that saw both veterans turn back the clock and remind everyone why they put independent wrestling on the map in the early 2000s. Samoa Joe finally got to wrestle at a stadium show after being fired twice by WWE, and the fans made sure he got the reaction he deserved. The performance is made all the more legendary when you consider CM Punk had just put Jack Perry in a chokehold backstage. Seriously, if you're bothered by the backstage incident, touch some grass. It's nowhere near as serious as last year. Anyway, the match order for this show was insane. After CM Punk defeated Joe to retain the real world title, we saw Kenny Omega, Hangman Page, and Kota Ibushi have their match against Jay White, Juice Robinson, and Konosuke Takeshita. This was a super fun trios match where everyone involved, even the Guns, got a chance to shine. The history between everyone here made for some nice callbacks, such as Ibushi and Jay or Omega and Jay. Every person in this match was deserving of an all-in moment. Takeshita getting the surprise win by pinning Omega was a great moment that leads into their match at All Out now. Following two really good matches, we headed towards FTR versus the Young Bucks for the tag team titles. I loved this match. It was a nice change of pace to see a Young Bucks match slowly crescendo into the final act that left everyone on the edge of their seats for the near falls. FTR winning the trilogy here was a prediction I was surprised I got right, but I'm sure this feud isn't over. The third match between these two happening at Wembley was a nice way for the two best tag teams in the world to show the world why they each have such loyal fan bases who consider them the very best of the industry. The fourth match of the night was the Stadium Stampede match, and it was unreal. I said this already for the trios match, but it's the same here. Every person had their chance to shine. Moxley, Kingston, Orange, Penta, Best Friends, Claudio, Yuta, and Santana and Ortiz all had their spots. A death match casually happening in one of the largest stadiums in the world in front of over 80,000 people is why I love AEW. The skewers, the ladder, the Sioux, it was all incredible, and the ending with Orange Cassidy using the glass on his hand to hit the orange punch to get the win was brilliant. The second half of the show moved at an even more blistering pace. After Stadium Stampede, we got the four-way for the women's title. Shida, Britt Baker, Toni Storm, and the hometown hero Saraya. Saraya got the special entrance with Queen's We Will Rock You. I said it in my prediction video, Saraya shouldn't be champion in 2023, but Tony Khan went for the Wembley pop in her home country and pissed off the rest of the world in the process. The match was actually going really well, everyone hit their spots, and it ended just when it was kicking into high gear, with the wrong person winning of course. I feel bad for Shida, but I'm glad she at least got to wrestle at Wembley. As for Saraya, I wouldn't be opposed to a debuting Mercedes Moné ending her reign quickly. Even if she doesn't sign full-time with AEW, we can all agree that Mercedes would be a far better champion than Saraya. There's a reason why they kept showing her on the big screen at the show. Then we had Darby Allin and Sting versus Swerve and Christian Cage in a coffin match. Straight up, I cried during Sting and Darby's entrance with Metallica's Seek and Destroy, a throwback to the late WCW days. Sting is my all-time favorite wrestler. He's my GOAT. He deserved this moment, an all-in moment, especially after how dirty he was done by WWE. All men shined. Swerve in particular getting 80,000 to chant Swerve's house was a sight to behold. Due to my own personal investment with Sting, this was one of my favorite matches of the night. All men took some gnarly bumps and made the most of their time at Wembley. But of course, it was Sting and Darby that put Swerve in the coffin to get the win. Just another feather in the cap of the icon, Sting. At this point, the sun has completely gone down and Wembley Stadium has that gorgeous cinematic look for the last 3 matches. The perfect time for Chris Jericho versus Will Ospreay. Chris Jericho and Fozzy did something they'll probably never do again by playing in front of over 80,000 people. Will Ospreay then made a grand entrance in front of his countrymen to the tune of Elevated. Honestly, this felt big time. While I've made it no secret that I'm not a fan of Chris Jericho as a character anymore, he held up well here against one of the best wrestlers on the planet. Will Ospreay, who's not even signed by AEW, then got one of the defining moments of his career when he pinned Chris Jericho to get the win. AEW is basically beating you over the head at this point to let you know that Ospreay will soon become All Elite once his contract with New Japan expires. And how could he not? He's defeated 2 of AEW's biggest stars on AEW programming now. Tony Khan clearly loves Will, and I find it hard to believe that he'll go anywhere else but AEW come 2024. The penultimate match saw House of Black defend their trios titles against The Acclaimed and Billy Gunn. House of Black had a touching tribute to Bray Wyatt during their entrance. The Acclaimed then made their entrance to one of the loudest pops of the night. From being nobodies on AEW Dark to now having over 80,000 chanting their catchphrases with them, The Acclaimed are one of wrestling's greatest success stories. Which is why I was not surprised when they beat the House of Black to win the trios titles. House of Black had basically done all they could with those belts. Now they can be in more personal feuds instead of focusing on titles. The Acclaimed and Billy Gunn, on the other hand, really needed a big win, and they got it in front of the biggest wrestling crowd ever. The Acclaimed should be an example to all aspiring young wrestlers out there that you can truly make it if you find a way to stand out. Finally, we reached the main event of the show, Adam Cole vs MJF for the AEW World title. This felt big time. The right story at the right time. Both men got superstar reactions that must have felt rewarding considering they both chose AEW over WWE. Now they were main eventing this historic show with a great story to tell. This was the end of the night, but it was when it truly sinked in that AEW is now officially the big leagues, along with WWE. The story of MJF not wanting to hurt his friend, but Adam Cole doing whatever it takes to be MJF was brilliant. Roderick Strong coming out to convince Cole to play dirty because MJF isn't his friend was hilarious yet convincing. I loved the main event. I loved the story. I loved when the match had to be restarted because Max said there has to be a winner at fucking Wembley. MJF winning the match with a roll-up was a nice tribute to the British Bulldog beating Bret Hart with a roll-up at Wembley in 1992, whether intentional or not. Then the post-match with MJF lashing out at Adam Cole for not being his friend. He gave the opportunity to Cole to knock him out while his back was turned, but in classic AEW fashion, friendship prevailed, and the Ring of Honor Tag Team Champions hugged it out to close the show to a rapturous ovation. A fantastic show from top to bottom with really only one blemish if you ask me, that being the women's title change. Even then, at least they got a good pop in the stadium, and that'll increase its rewatchability. This was AEW's first stadium show and it almost couldn't have gone better. With All In now done, AEW has forever etched its name in the history books. Whether the record gets broken or not down the line doesn't even matter. What matters is that AEW held the record at all, and now they've made a statement. You said we couldn't do a stadium show. Well, we just did. The biggest one ever. The confirmation of All In at Wembley once again happening next year is AEW once again betting on themselves. Maybe they won't sell 81 tickets next year, but I can still see them selling around 70,000, which would be fantastic within its own right. The point is, AEW has found their WrestleMania equivalent, something that fans have been clamoring for. A show where the world stops and you watch because it's just that monumental. Wrestlers no longer have to join one wrestling promotion in America in order to wrestle at a stadium show. It's a win for the entire wrestling industry, and it'll make wrestlers consider where they want to wrestle at whenever they have the choice between WrestleMania or All In. All In 2023 will go down as one of the most important wrestling shows ever, just like the first All In back in 2018. It's the moment AEW did the truly impossible, and who knows what stadium they run next. You'd be a fool to doubt that they could do it anywhere at this point. When an AEW pay-per-view is over, usually I just look forward to the next one. With All In this year, it was the first time I looked forward not to the next pay-per-view, but to the same pay-per-view the next year. And that's what I'll be doing, counting down the days until All In 2024. All In was a success, but even then, success is an understatement. AEW was already successful. This elevated them into the S tier of wrestling promotions across all of history, because All In is more than a success. This type of event is what turns a successful company into a legendary one.